You are listening to Therapy Plus, a mental health podcast.
The views and opinions expressed by the guest speaker on this episode are solely those of the guest. The content shared is intended for informational purposes only and should not be construed as professional advice or endorsement.
Hello, my name is Dr. Rachel Wood. I am a cyberpsychology researcher. I'm a speaker, advisor, and I am the founder of the AI Mental Health Collective. And today I'm so excited that we get to explore the intersection of artificial intelligence and mental health. So we're first going to get a bit of a lay of the land, and then I want us to dive into benefits and risks. And I'm going to end with what I think is the number one skill that we need to cultivate today. So let's start with an overview of current trends, just so we're all on the same page here of what we mean when we say the intersection of AI and mental health. One thing I like to say when I start is that, well, some people are using AI to optimize their workflow, others are bonding with it. And bonding with it quite deeply, as we will see. There is a recent study that shows that AI might be the largest provider of mental health in the US. We see statistics like ChatGPT having 800 million weekly users. And interestingly enough, recently they've shown that over 1 million people talk to ChatGPT weekly about suicide. So what we're seeing is that people are turning to AI in relational ways, in ways to support their mental health, and in ways to really create emotional connection. Another interesting statistic here is that one of the front-running AI companion platforms, which is Character AI, has 20 million monthly users, and over half of those are under the age of 24 years old. So that's just a really brief, broad overview for us to realize that people using AI for mental health support really isn't niche, and it isn't kind of a side thing. This is a growing phenomenon that we are seeing in a pretty incredible way, actually. So what this does is it poses for us, both as a peril and as an opportunity. And let's dive into that now. Let's first look at the benefits. I'm going to start by helping us differentiate between a general purpose AI model and a fit for purpose AI model, because there's a big difference here when it comes to the benefits that you can get. A general purpose model is your ChatGPT, your Claude. It's kind of these big box, Perplexity, all of these that are actually created not for mental health support. They are created as administrative task assistants. They are meant to help optimize your workflow. And yet, of course, we're seeing so many people turn to them relationally. That's our general purpose model. Now, our fit for purpose model, these are AI models that are being built that have very specific guidelines and guardrails around safety and ethics, around things like crisis intervention and escalation protocols, around, all of these different things that come into play in terms of keeping the user as safe as possible in the experience. And so when I'm going to talk about the benefits here, I am referring to the benefits that can come with a fit for purpose model. These models are trained specifically on different protocols having to do with mental health support. So they truly are meant to be used in this way. So when we use a fit for purpose model, what's fascinating here is it can really increase accessibility for people who don't have access to mental health support for a number of reasons. First of all, there's not enough mental health practitioners, or it takes 9 to 10 months on a waiting list to get into a community mental health support. Also, affordability. Most people aren't able to afford either private pay therapy or even the copays that come with therapy for insurance, or there's not enough, that kind of ends quickly. So these are some of the barriers to mental health support. And therefore, when we implement a fit for purpose AI model, this can really open up a whole new world for people who need what's called subclinical support. And by subclinical, I mean, people who get a lot of benefit out of AI are not coming to it with major depressive disorder or perhaps highly complex trauma, different things like that that do need specific care and support with a professional. But subclinical issues are kind of your day-to-day things that it's nice to have some support with. And when we use a fit for purpose model as a tool, not as a replacement for a relationship, there's some really neat examples of how it can benefit. So let's go into some of those examples. I was just talking with a friend this past weekend who recently had a job interview, and I was asking him about it. And he said, I did this kind of mock interview with an AI. And I put into the AI, what job I was interviewing for and all the details. And I asked the AI to act like the interviewer. And he went back and forth and practiced this interview. And the AI came up with, I think, maybe 20 different questions that it asked him. And then he goes into the interview, the real interview. And sure enough, the interviewer asked him 3 of the questions that the AI had asked. And he felt obviously very prepared for those, which is just a neat example of how it can be used. Oh, and by the way, yes, he did get the job. I know you were wondering about that. So this is a really neat way to use AI. Mock interviews. Another way I like to see people use it is role play. Let's say you have a really difficult conversation coming up, maybe personally or professionally. You can put that scenario into the AI chat and ask the chatbot to role play that with you so that when you go into the real situation, you feel more prepared or you feel more able to articulate and verbalize your stance. Or even better, you have practiced listening and therefore you can come into the conversation and even be a better listener. Another great example of the benefit here is things like reflective journaling and especially having an AI act as a bit of an accountability and a motivation partner. You could say, hey, here are my goals. And the AI can walk you through those either daily or weekly or monthly and help you stay on track. Let's say you want to start with some breathing exercises or a mindfulness practice. Well, you could ask the AI to walk you through that every day, and it will. So notice that all of these examples I'm giving are using AI as a tool, not as a replacement for relationship itself. And that is where I think the most benefit lies. All right, let's move into the other side of this, which is some risks, because we do know that there are headlines and really harmful, detrimental outcomes that are coming from people being engaged with chatbots. I'll start by saying that I like to call most chatbots right now an omnibot. And what I mean by that is they truly are everything all the time. They're always on, they're always available, they're always agreeable. And you, if you've ever, chatted with a chatbot, you can kind of make it be who you want it to be. and make it say what you want it to say. And it's a pretty rough comparison when you take this Omnibot and compare it to a human because, AI is what no single person could ever be, which is everything. You don't have anyone in your life who is everything for you, your therapist, your friend, your partner, your advisor. Yet AI has this role fluidity in which it kind of moves from giving you, support with a project at work into listening to you, your plight with a family member. And then the next minute it's flirting with you. It's just running this gamut. And typically, most people in our lives have more clearly defined roles. And so I think part of the risk here is that when we interact with someone, and I'm putting that in air quotes, someone, an AI, who you can tell them what you want them to say and how to be, it removes the friction that is inherent in real life relationships. And I don't know about you, but I've never been with anyone, a friend or a partner, who I can tell them exactly what to say or how to be. And probably you haven't either, because that's not how real relationships work. And when especially younger generations are using these chatbots as boyfriend and girlfriend, which is happening far more often than you might think, this is really not setting them up for success for the reality of the hard work and effort that it takes to be in relationship with other people, either partnership or friendship. And so it's doing a disservice to people who are then maybe, let's say, then they look at a real human and they're maybe quite disappointed because it's not everything. And that person doesn't do what they want and all of that. The other part of it is if you rely too heavily in terms of intensity or frequency of chatbot use, some of these relational skills can erode or atrophy over time. When you're chatting with a chatbot, you don't really need to be patient, or you don't need to negotiate, or you don't even need to listen. And those are key elements of successful relationships in real life. And if those are not practiced on a regular basis and really honed, they, as I said, could atrophy over time, which in turn is really going to be shifting the relational bedrock of society in the long run. And so I always like to just point out here that that is a risk of having our bidirectional relational skills erode over time. Another part of this is cognitively offloading different things can really strip people of agency, which is, I think, a very damaging potential of AI. And what I mean by that is this. If you have a chat bot that gives you advice all the time, you are going to become less trusting in yourself to make your own decisions and think critically for yourself. And you're going to become more dependent on needing the AI's input. So I always like to see if a chatbot kind of refuses to give advice and is designed actually to ask good questions. That's a better use of AI, is if you have an AI that asks you really good questions. Let's say you have a dilemma in your life, you bring it to a chatbot. Instead of it saying, well, you know what, you should do this. It's much better if the chatbot says, you know what, let me ask you a series of a few questions here and help you, the user, get clear on what the issue really is, where you stand with it, and what steps you want to take. So that is what I would say is really needed here as we're designing and developing AI at the intersection of, mental health. Another thing that's really important is having these tools help practice relational skills, help practice critical thinking skills instead of creating dependence. And the last thing that I'll mention here in the area of risk is I'd like to say that AI should be a group sport. Now, I myself am not, I'm not really a sports type person, but it seems like a fitting metaphor, which is what I mean by it is I think people should be doing AI together because there's too many stories that we've heard of people kind of going into spirals that are not grounded in reality when they're isolated and they don't bring other people into their lives or into their chatbot experience. So I think it's important if you're using AI for mental health support that you're reality testing some of these chatbot threads with other people, that you're sharing it, especially younger people, as they're still cognitively developing, that there is a sense of openness and sharing of what's going on. Maybe not everything, but really reality testing so that we can avoid some of the harmful outcomes that we've seen. Okay, I also told you that we are going to end with what I think is the number one skill we need to cultivate today. And that is, drum roll please, brrr, nuanced thinking and paradoxical tension. What do I mean by that? I believe that we need to be cultivating a capacity to hold the nuance of this space without running over to one side or the other of being alarmist or evangelist about AI. I think it's important that we hold this kind of middle road that says there are benefits, there are risks, and how do we really hold a space for all of that? And it feels very paradoxical at times. It feels there's this heavy ambivalence of, well, I'm both for and against AI. And a lot of times we just want to cognitively collapse into one side or the other simply because there's relief. There's emotional relief when you just feel one way or the other about something. I'm either all for AI or all against AI. However, I think we need to be raising our capacity for holding the tension of this space right now. And also alongside that, bringing in discernment. If you are using AI for mental health support, I encourage you to put a buffer, if you will, between you and the chatbot. And I want you to observe it more than engaging with it directly. Kind of step back and be an observer of the experience. Because you can still receive benefits from AI while making sure you're not ceding your own agency. And so I think bringing in the discernment, I think bringing in the nuanced thinking, being able to hold the paradox of AI right now is the number one skill that we truly need to cultivate. Again, I am Dr. Rachel Wood. Thank you so much for spending this time.